let me just quickly set the scene around maybe what we want to do, what is our challenge for a day, and how we would want to solve it. So building on what the Moish has demonstrated already, let's imagine a scenario where in my imaginary company, I have a very old process where my co-workers, my colleagues might have their monthly expenses that they might have to expense through the accounting process, and my current process is so old that all the invoices are coming in the email to the accounting clerk. Then he have to extract all the information from the manually, store it into a database so that we could analyze it and work on it after. How much good would that be if this process could be turned into automatic? How much time would that be saved for our company? So a quick user story that we define in this case. As a user, I say I want to extract and store purchase items from the expense it receives attached to incoming emails, so that I can easily access and manage the data in the database. I have written a few acceptance criteria for my process. I say my process will be successful only if it can achieve the following. When the email with expenses is received, the system should automatically detect and process the attachments. That shouts out Power Automate already in my head. For number 2, the system should store received copies items in a database, associating them with a corresponding email user account. Okay, here maybe we might have to do some lookups into the contacts, identify who's who sent us an email, and so on. For number 3, we quickly have the system should be able to handle various receipt formats and adapt to changes in the structure or content of a receipt. And this is where the magic of AI model comes in. Because obviously the model is capable of acting on this variation in the given inputs. For a number 4, the system should extract relevant data from each receipt, including purchase items such as item name and price. Okay, this is simple. In Moish model, we saw that there's so much more that the AI models can capture from the given input, but for us, that will probably do. And last but not least, to make it a production-worth process, we should probably have some problem handling, error handling. What if, for any reason, our process fails? We might want to inform automatically our support admins. And so, next, quickly, let's go through the simple data model that we defined for this process. So here, as you see, we have 3 entities. We're going to have a contact information stored in a database. We will have an entity to store the actual receipts files, and then last but not least, a separate entity where we will be storing our items of those receipts. Down at the bottom, just a quick look into the schema of the actual flow, or how the process should run. So yes, we can see our trigger. Yes, we will have to find or link the contacts with the individual who sent us the invoices. We will have to extract the receipt data. So we will have to use the AI model here to extract the data from the actual receipts. And last but not least, obviously, store the information in our data source. Okay, for given scenario, I'm not going to demonstrate this directly on the screen. We saw in Moish's presentation how this works, but I'll just quickly go through the steps involved. Again, we will use the describe to design it, a creation option of the flows. In the description section, I just typed in, when a new email arrives with attached receipts as images, extract the received content using the AI model. I click submit button, and I am giving the options, in this case, a few options of what my flow template action steps would look like. I can accept a given one. I could even, down at the bottom here, we can see there's even an option to show different suggestions. So if we're not happy with maybe the given first scenario doesn't ideally represent what we need, we could even switch that. and move on into a second step of this two-step approach where we are building the connections to data services. As we can see here from the screen, system Power Automate is automatically identifies the sign-in user. So it would create the connections to like an Outlook data service, Dataverse data service with a given user's account. But if need by, that can be changed. So say we need to use a service account or some accounting email inbox for the received emails, that can be changed and set up as per our needs. Once it's all ready, we click on the next. And last step, we're being presented with a template, pretty much a blank template of our what our flow would look like. So at this stage, we're ready to start filling the gaps. So let me just switch quickly to my on the screen. Can you see my screen here now? Yeah. Brilliant. Right. So let's quickly analyze what we have here. The first section on the top here, we can see that Power Automate named my flow exactly to the phrase that I've described in the request for the new flow. We could use this opportunity to rename it maybe to something shorter, maybe to something more meaningful or helpful. So let's call this a receipt processor. Why not flow? We can see our a trigger given here. This is pretty much when a new email arrives, a blank template. Since we have identified in our request for a new flow that we will be working with attachments in our process, the Power Automate automatically pre-selected me include attachments and only with attachments options. Here, we don't need to specify anything else. We don't even need to fill the two because the service knows that the connection is made with this account, so it will read to this inbox for incoming emails. The only suggestion I would have here, maybe, so that it doesn't trigger on every single email that comes to my inbox, I would suggest let's put something like expenses in the subject filter, so we only trigger this flow to the emails that contains that catchphrase in the subject filter section. So our trigger is complete. Let's see what actions Power Automate suggested us. Just the two actions at this point. It says, okay, so we're gonna within the for each loop. So it has identified that we will want to trigger this action for each attachment in our incoming email. So it created me a for each loop. It knows that it's going to work on each attachment from the email, and we have a couple of actions inside of that. So first action here, it says, let's predict using AI builder model. So let's take a peek inside of this. Here, we have an option of choosing the model. So as we've seen earlier on, Microsoft has pre-trained already quite a few different models for different business scenarios. So we can pick and choose from the existing models. But on the side of that, of course, if there's a need, we can even build our own model as is required. For today, let's just choose the receive scanning model. How this model works, once the model is selected, it asks us to provide as a mandatory field a file that this is going to look at. So if I just to click on that field here to select the file, in dynamic context section, I've already suggested to work this step on the attachment content. So on the actual content of the receipt that is being sent to me. Okay, this step is completed. We can, if we need to, if we want to, rename these steps so it makes a little bit more. It becomes a little bit easier to understand it. Maybe it helps our co-workers if we're working on the same process together to understand what these steps do. So let's call this scan receipt step. Great, and the second given action for us is suggesting that we want to store this information somewhere. So it's a step of adding a new row in a Dataverse entity. If I click this, once again, it asks me to choose the entity or a table to which this information should be stored. as we said, we want to store the received items. So let's just drop this in my received items entity. I select this table. I can see that there is one mandatory field in this entity. It's just an item name. So why don't we configure that as well? Once I click on this item name, I can see that in the dynamic content section, Power Automate suggests me already what elements I want to take. And these elements are coming from the previous step. So in this case, from a step, scan the receipts. So I'll just pick purchased item name. In that, since scanning of the objects will return us an array of items, so multiple items, so each receipt can have one or more than one items inside of it. Power Automate straight away identifies that this is going to be an array, and it drops my step into so-called apply to each loop, meaning that for every returned received item, I'm going to perform the same action. So again, that's all done automatically for me. My flow is ready to be saved and is ready to be tested. Let's see how that works, and maybe we can then expand on this and see how we can turn it into a more production ready flow. So just quickly to demonstrate for this exercise, I just grabbed a couple of sample receipts from the internet. One of them is about some boutique items. The quality of that is reasonably low, actually. I can barely read it into it. So let's see how the Power Automate, Power AI model is going to work. Other one is about some clothes, and there's watching this, also some reasonably expensive purchases. Don't know if that should be expense for the company, but let's give that a go. So I'm going to send myself an email. So let's click on the test section of the flow. We're going to test this manually. I'm going to click on a test, and I'm going to send myself an email like so. So it's from me to myself. I've included that subject, the catchphrase, expense in there. I've attached those two receipts to the email. The body of the email is quite irrelevant at this point. I send this out, and let's see what happens there. You can see the email arrives. Let's just give it another moment for our flow to trigger. Yes, so the trigger has happened. The for each loop is currently counting time. So while that is doing, let's maybe have a quick peek into outputs of this trigger. So what information is that we're actually getting from all of those steps on the Power Automate? One of the great methods here is just simply click to the download option. What this will do, it opens us another browser window, and we can see in this window it literally lays out the response to the JSON from the given step. In this case, from our trigger, we can see here it's classified, grouped into a headers, it grouped into a body, response body. Within that response body, we can see things like from a property. So this is probably something that we will use later in our process when we want to identify and link the receipt with the actual sender. And the lower there, we can see we have the attachments, array of the attachments, and obviously all of the content of our images. So that is, again, good way to analyze and understand what is happening behind the scenes, behind all this fancy UI, which we see from the Power Automate window. Okay, so that's, if we close this, we can see our next step is done. So for each loop has worked. We can see both of the actions are green, both of the actions are successful. We can see that we've scanned two separate receipts, and we can see that within those receipts we identified and we processed on the receipt 1 we have 3 items, and on the receipt 2 we have 4 items. If I could quickly jump here onto my table, this receipt items table, and I refresh the screen, I can see that I have all these items in my table. I haven't passed anything like a price or a received link yet, but I can see that this part of my process already works. Just take them off for a sec because next time we don't want them to be in the way. But back to our process, back to our flow. Let's keep editing this. So next step, as we know in our process, we said we needed to find to link the contacts with the receipts. So why don't we drop another steps outside of the for each loop, because for each loop again works for each of the attachments in our email. So we just need to find the contact one time. So if I choose to add a new step in this flow, I can see that my actions are grouped into a type of the actions. If I go into a Dataverse actions, I would say list the rows. I would like to find a row of a specific contact. So let's choose a contact table. Contact. Do that without spelling mistake. That'd be brilliant. But let's choose a contact table. Let's see what parameters we can pass here to make this work quicker. Maybe another good practice. Let's rename these fields so these action steps so they are easily to read and understand. So let's call this find contact. So in our contact entity, I would maybe could demo you here. This is my imaginary company. These are my imaginary colleagues. I have myself in there. I have an email column. So what I really want to do, I want to compare this value of this email column with the value that I receive from a property in my trigger body. So now, how should I do that? How should I do that? I know I have an option of filtering the rows, and I can use so-called OData style syntax to filter these rows. So instead of returning all the contacts into my process and then doing the filtering here within the Power Automate, I can pass the filtering back to the data source, which it makes the thing so much quicker, and it obviously reduces the load of our process. So very quickly, I could come in here. One of the ways of finding the contact that you're looking for, click on the edit column. In advanced features, what we need to find is a logical name for the column that we want to filter against. And quickly copy that, bring it back to my process, paste it here. We could use now, say, data expression equals. So it's just the EQ. And what we really want to compare it is against this from a property from our trigger body. So that needs to be within the speech marks, but this type of expression would return us that it requires contact. Now, knowing that we will use the return of this contact in our process to link the receipt with the contact, there's no need to return the full metadata, full rich metadata that Power Automate would give us if we were to request the response about the contact. So to limit that, again, we could use this option called select columns. And then here we could just provide the column logical names for Power Automate to return that to us. So another quick method here to do so. This is the property I want. So this is the ID of the contact that I want. So the way to select this column logical name, we're going to use exactly the same method. So it's just a edit column. You jump into the advanced options, and we have that logical name hidden there for us. Remembering all these fancy ways of naming columns is probably a bit impractical. So this is a great way of identifying what you actually need in your process. And this is it. So this process is now set and completed. This is going to return us the ID of the contact. Back to our for each loop. We know we proceeded the scanning here. I could maybe insert another option here to say we want to save now the receipts in the entity. So another Dataverse action that we can use is called add the row. I quickly click on that. Okay, let's rename this to add a receipt. This will go to our receipt entity. The wrong one. almost correct ourselves this way. Yeah, receipts. Happy there now. Okay, so here we know that we will pass a contact. So this is the ID that is coming back to. Now, passing information to a lookup column might seem a little bit tricky because apart from providing the ID to the step, we need to provide the entity schema name for that as well. So one of the ways to find that is as shown here. If I would come back to my identity, back to my table, just go to a tools section here at the top, I can copy set name. Just copy set name here. I can pass that quickly, paste it into there. The set name in this case is a contact, and in the brackets, I can contact. Right, so this will bring it into another for each loop simply because our find contact step will return us an array of an items. Again, exactly the same process what we saw with our the received items. So I could leave it as it is, knowing this is going to be only a single loop, or I can quickly change this process and to write that the extraction out of it. So knowing that I will, this is what I will. Okay, I know. Sorry, my bad. Let's rewrite that. So instead of using this method, I will take the outputs from the step find contact. Now the results of that will sit inside of a body, and within that body, we're going to have a value. And now all I want just the first element, first item of this list. And giving this first item, I would say, this case, provide me a contact ID, which we defined earlier. That's good. So another great way of working with Power Automate, you can drag and drop these elements, these actions any way you want. So I could take it out of this, out from each, apply to each loop. I can even drop that loop because I feel like I don't want it. Okay, so we have our step for add the receipt completed. Now that file or image upload in the Dataverse, it's a two-step approach. So first we need to create an item, then we need to use an upload the file or image step. So because we say we want to store our receipts within the entity, so let's choose the entity. For the draw ID, we know we're going to use the ID of this previously created record. This is just going to be a receipt, and we know it's a receipt unique identifier for entity instance. The column name is given for us. We can choose the columns that are the type of a file or an image. And last but not least, we can select the content that we are providing for this step. So in this case, it's going to be an attachment. We can select that in a dynamic content as well. And it's a attachment content. Okay. Quickly, let's rename this step to, again, something more friendly for us. Upload a, let's call it received image. Yeah, happy. So now we can work in our flow, which is the best order of the flow. Maybe we want to add receive first. Maybe we want to obviously the flow the image afterwards. Maybe the scanning can come after that. Once again, we can drop and drop these elements as we feel to. Okay, next, just quickly to finalize in our next step, which we can, again, for the sake of each, we can apply this to each item to help us read this easier. This step is not very clear as well. Let's call it add item. Right. So as we know, in the beginning of this exercise, as we did, we knew that we were not able to store the price of the item. And if we look into the suggested elements from this a process, we can see that there are quite a few elements given to us. They might not all make clear sense. We can see some coordinates there. We can see a lot of elements here and there. So what is the best way for us to define or find the way to the data that we actually need in our step? Let me just bring you back a step to our flow. One step I wanted to demonstrate you from our previous success safe is the actual payload or the response from our receive scanning or AI model usage. So this is the output. This is the entire body of our process step. This is probably not the best ideal scenario how to analyze this info. So if we could copy all of that and bring, let's say, to our favorite code editor. In my case, let's jump it into the Visual Studio Code. I could quickly visualize what all of this, what this step does. We can see it even returns over 2,000 rows of code for us. But it is formed as, we can see there's a response, we can see that there's a prediction output, we can see the status that we can check against, and then down at the bottom we can start seeing our items that are coming through. So we can see the value, we can see the name of the item, we can start seeing the value of the item. Again, that's being displayed to us as a string, so maybe we might need some data conversion here. But quickly, I can see our time is coming to the end there, and I can see Katerina is already looking at me. So why don't I quickly push this expression from the sample, and would show you how we can build all of these expressions. So even if we have to work within Power Automate with the data that is not necessarily given or shown to us exactly how we would expect it, we can build these expressions ourselves. And in this case, let me just show here in price section, I will build this expression and drop this line of the code. What this does, it will convert that string into a float. It will take the item from scan received item, and it will pass this info into the flow, into the flow each item. Let me just rename that step, so that otherwise we might have a problem. Okay, so that's this section. Last but not least, we need to link this with a receipt. Again, the receipt entity, the set name is called a receipt, new receipt, and we can take the receipt ID that we already seen in the previous step. Okay, so all in all, given this, we could save our flow. We could run quickly another test and cross the fingers that everything would work. Okay, ready to test. I click on the test. I'll send myself another email to trigger the process. Email has arrived. So let's just give it a moment or two for the flow to trigger. So the flow is running. We can see that the contact has been found. This step is green. The flow will go for each of the following steps as it is quiet. This will not take too long. While this is running, again, maybe a quick demo, what output we're getting from find contact step, which we can again see in this very kind approach in the browser. Okay, all done, all ready, all good. I were to go now through into my receipt entity, and let's try and have a look what is inside of there. Do we have any contacts? There you go. We have a couple of receipts that we created. The receipts are linked with a contact who sent an email. I can see the stored items inside there. That is all acceptable. Great. If I go into my receipt item entity, I can refresh that. This time I can see the item names. I can see the prices scanned from there, and I can see how receipts are linked with it.